ESPN, Fox, CBS all say they're interested in the Pac-12's media rights. So here we go again, but I don't know why they're interested right now.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. That is college football, of course. And this episode brought to you by friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Carter Baines of 24/7 Sports is here to discuss, and we'll have Drake Toll locked on Big 12 because the schedule is out. Oh boy, BYU is hopping mad, but it's kind of their own fault. Let's get to that later, though. And right now, Carter, a report from Front Office Sports. Amanda Kristovich reporting, Kristovich, something along those lines, that ESPN, Fox, CBS, all open to media rights package with the Pac-12, which is great news for Teresa Gold and company. But here's what I don't understand. The Pac-12, according to this article, wants to make a move to get their media rights contract before adding their 8th full-time member, which they have to have by 2026. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because what if you pull a proverbial rabbit out of the hat and get Memphis to leave the AAC, just as a hypothetical? Doesn't that have to change your media rights calculation at least a little? Or does it just say that, hey, no one that they add is actually going to make a tangible difference here?
It tells me, I think, that the Pac-12 is fairly confident that they're not going to make one of those splashy additions at this point. Like, if you're going to the market now, I think it lends itself more to either a lateral addition or someone who you think could potentially decrease the media rights value per team if you went to the market after you added it. So, like, why the networks would be interested in that if you're bringing in, say, a Sacramento State with FCS background. I get the Sacramento market, but it's not a huge FBS brand. That would decrease theoretically your per team valuation if you were to go to market after the addition. So going now, I think, in my opinion, signals that they're locked in with the core they have, and that anyone they add from this point forward wouldn't be one of those big name group of 5 schools.
Yeah, that's I think that's the right way to probably look at it. Now, the reporting on this matter has indicated Sacramento State is more likely to become an FBS independent than jump up and join the Pac-12. And for a conference that is obviously trying to position itself as the premier group of 5 conference in all of college football that can get its conference champion essentially into the playoff every year, barring an undefeated campaign from an American conference team or maybe a new look Mountain West, but they've just pulled all the best teams out of the Mountain West, Boise State and San Diego State and Fresno State in particular there. I wonder what this valuation or this decision from the Pac-12 to say we're going to go to market first says about the UNLV factor, because it's seen as kind of a burgeoning market, up and coming, but does it really change the calculus? Are you adding so many viewers or television homes that the network is really going to change the amount of money it's willing to put forward? Probably not. And I think UNLV is closer to the category of, yeah, it's just an 8th member we need, and we have to have another school to get above this threshold, rather than, hey, we have now brought in a market that we weren't tapped into before. Because remember, they've added Colorado State as well, so they're over there. They're in California. They've got Boise State. I think that lines up with where they're trying to go. It's just a matter of who the next move is going to be, but kind of seems like it could be anybody right now.
Yeah, there's really no lean, obviously. I mean, with the American schools locking in theoretically long-term, I mean, you take them for whatever their word is worth there with that public commitment. The Mountain West restructuring and actively adding programs, I think it kind of shows that the Pac-12 is stuck in a way when the Mountain West is going out and adding members like Northern Illinois, and the Pac-12 is kind of just sitting on its hands. Like, it hasn't had that obvious candidate pop up, because all of the best additions that would obviously improve the brand and improve the stock of the conference, your Memphises, your Tulanes, your UNLVs, have already vocally committed to their present conferences. So without that obvious move, without that obvious addition, it's kind of hard to say, like, yeah, this is a clear next step for the conference, other than that Sacramento State move, which, as you said, potentially looks like they're more likely to go independent at first anyway. Like, if the Pac-12 is stuck with taking, say, even like a New Mexico State or like a Rice or a North Texas, I think that's a huge loss for the conference. That would be viewed more as desperation of, hey, we've got to get to 8 teams, as opposed to, hey, we're actively adding value to the conference right now.
And I think this move, from a perception standpoint, which is going to matter tremendously for this conference over the next couple of years, because you've got a subjective sport in college football. How you are viewed by outsiders, you may not want it to matter, but it always has, and it always will. This was a really, really big move when they pulled off getting Boise State and Fresno State and San Diego State from the Mountain West. They've added Colorado State and Utah State in there as well. Gonzaga for basketball. Like, those are really good, tangible moves, but so much has happened since then. And the conference has kind of been flying under the radar, keeping things low profile and such. This move, whoever you end up adding, I think it is going to feed very heavily into the narrative and discussion surrounding your conference and how strong it is. Because, to your point, they have to have a team. So if you go out and you're in a we have to have it, got to get a school situation, and then you add someone that everyone looks at and goes, what have they ever done in sport? No one said that about Boise State or San Diego State, but they could say that about this particular move, and why getting Memphis, I think, would be position A, and position M is, I don't know, a Rice probably. You're in the Houston market and Texas area, but is that really worth it for a school that, you know, was once great at baseball, but not much else?
I'll tell you what, it reminds me a lot of the 7th edition that they made in Utah State, where Utah State was kind of in that same time frame as when all of those other schools committed to their conferences. And the Mountain West, you remember that dance they were playing of, like, they're trying to lock in their core while the Pac-12 is also taking away at the same time. And I think what you saw at the time was, like, they felt like they needed to keep moving, and they picked up Utah State, which, in my opinion, and I don't mean this in any, you know, disrespectful manner to Utah State, they've got a great basketball program. They have had success, and some nice coaches and players come through that Utah State program over the last decade or two. But I don't think Utah State does anything to take the Pac-12 from that Mountain West plus, in air quotes, to best group of 5 conference. And I think at the moment, it struck me as one of those desperation moves of, we've got to keep this ball rolling and keep teams coming and see if we can maybe add that 8th right now. That's the vibe I get right now from the fulcrum, you know, the point of inflection that you're at now, like you mentioned, from the PR standpoint of, okay, well, if you add another Utah State type, does that maybe devalue the way your conference is viewed in a, you know, in the light that you're trying to become the best group of 5 conference out there? Whereas if you added a more established brand name in that caliber, I think that would take you to the next level and give you a lot of cachet in the public eye.
Carter Baines, 24/7 Sports. Great, as always, is BYU's schedule. Great for him in the Big 12. Plenty of Cougar fans don't think so, and I get it. It's tough. It's not all bad news, though. First reminder, this episode brought to you by Game Time. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price, that can be a headache, but not with Game Time. With Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Here's how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you, curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listing. I have used Game Time Picks before, and let me tell you, it shows you the best deals. It shows you everything that you need to know going into the event, whether it's a comedy show or a sporting event, anything you want to see. Game Time's got it, and they've got Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. So, ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. It's here. It's beautiful, unless you're a BYU fan. The Big 12 schedule has been officially released. We'll discuss today. Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12, is joining me here. I almost thought that was an Arizona State logo on your sweatshirt there. It had some ASU vibes, but it's just a Savannah Banana logo, so we'll just have to live with that. But I tell you what, if you're a BYU fan and you look at this 2025 schedule, and you want to call Brett Yormark and leave an angry voicemail like you want to yell at a congressman for voting against a piece of legislation he said he would vote in favor of, I wouldn't be able to blame you here, Drake.
You know, BYU fans are not happy with the fact that there will be a 70-day span. Greg Wrubell, the voice of the Cougars, tweets out 70-day span between September 6th, November 15th, where BYU will play two. That is 2 home football games. What is the bread and butter of BYU football? It would be home games. They're very good at those because of the atmosphere at LaVell Edwards Stadium. The fact you don't get very many for that long of a stretch is going to be something that hampers a team that was so good in one-score victories last year. JT Westerso of Locked On Utes has brought this up a lot. Teams that win one-score games or lose one-score games fluctuate year by year. So a team that was 6-1 in one-score games last season, there's a good chance they go 2-5 this year or 1-3 in those very same sort, because that's the nature of college football. For BYU, you need as much home time as possible to build off of last season. Now, do I think that everybody is happy with the Big 12 schedule? Actually, no. Everyone's pretty upset. West Virginia, only one home game in October. That one's against TCU. Schools like a UCF are looking around going, hey, where's our rival? Can we have like a rival, please, or something? And does it have to be Houston? And schools like Baylor are posing the question, hey, we're playing Houston during rivalry week. Why don't we all, like as a collective, have this Friday, Saturday, where we can see BYU, Utah, a TCU, Baylor, Kansas State, Iowa State. And then we start to ask the question, why aren't Baylor and Texas Tech playing this year? The first time since the Eisenhower administration, the Big 12 saying
1950s. I know when the Eisenhower administration is, in case you doubted my nerd capabilities out there.
Yeah, that's why he has a girlfriend. And the Big 12,
it's funny because I don't.
Fan bases are asking the question where it seems so obvious to have these built-in rivalries because these schools and fan bases love them, even if it's not on a rivalry weekend. Just having Baylor, Texas Tech, or Iowa State, Kansas State every year, no one's going to be mad. No one's going to be upset about Yormark for protecting some of our favorite long-standing games, but instead we're throwing them away. We reemphasize that with the schedule, and we see again that when the biggest Saturday of college football rolls around, like imagine you're not JT, you're Spencer. Imagine, Spencer, this last year, that BYU and Utah game was played on rivalry weekend with a spot in the college football playoff on the line. Iowa State, Kansas State was, and it rocked. There is a fear amongst the Big 12 that they would get swallowed up by Alabama, Auburn, or Michigan, Ohio State at noon. And so they are too scared to put their football games on that day. That's the reason they do it. No doubt about it. And I think it sucks.
Well, having that fear, I understand it. I wish it wasn't in play. I understand why college football as a sport puts their national championship on a Monday, even though it's dumb. But I understand they look at that and go, that's how we avoid the NFL. We don't want to go head to head. But is that actually serving the fans? No, that's serving the network executives that are planning all of this, the people that are profiting off of college football who actually don't care very much about the sport itself, no matter what they may say or how happy they are to be the partner in this, that, and the other thing. There are a lot of moves like this, for instance, a lack of rivalry weekend highlighting by the Big 12 where fans have to look around and go, wait, aren't we the reason that you have a sport in the first place. This would be a glorified exhibition if tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people didn't show up to a stadium, or if millions didn't watch on TV. You wouldn't have any of this. Why can you not consider us in your decision making? And that's where I've always come at sports discussion and commentary in these sorts of matters is, hey, can we remember why sports are great? Remember in COVID when there were no fans in the stands? It was better than nothing, but it stunk. It stunk. It wasn't the same product, didn't have the same juice, didn't feel anywhere near as exciting. But on the BYU front, I want to go back to this because I think the point that JT made to you is the correct one, which is the Cougars have got 6 home games and 6 road games. That is not a typical split for a Power 4 team because they're going at East Carolina. I don't know why they are doing this. And on the one hand, I understand the frustration for BYU fans to say, hey, we had 2 home games in this long of a stretch. What the heck is that? On the flip side, some of that is on BYU because the non-conference scheduling is left up to who? The universities to control. I think they have too much control. But they're playing Stanford at home on September 6th, and then the following weekend, they've got a bye, and then they go at East Carolina. Nobody made them do that. That is something that was orchestrated by the university. So I think you can have a gripe with the Big 12 Conference and how they have laid this thing out, while also recognizing that stat that the voice of the Cougars tweeted out is also partially the fault of the administration.
Can I also put it into perspective for BYU fans?
No, you're not allowed to. It's my show, and you'll do whatever I say. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Can I help BYU fans a little bit here? You didn't get one of the hardest schedules in this conference. Your non-conference is pretty pitiful, by the way. You're going to win all 3 of those games. You should go win them going away. Then you open conference play with these 4 games: at Colorado, West Virginia, Arizona, Utah, teams you beat the brakes off of last year, or teams that shouldn't be that great this year. That at Colorado is the toughest of those 4, I think, because the Utah game is at home. Your toughest 2, you have a bye week between them: at Iowa State, bye at Texas Tech. Then you finish the year at home against TCU, at Cincinnati, at home against UCF. You'll be favored in probably all 3 of those. You got a pretty soft cushion to open with, a pretty soft landing spot as well, and your toughest games have a bye week between them. If anybody should be excited about where the Big 12 put you, it's probably the BYU Cougars. There are other schools like a Cincinnati who opens with Nebraska next season who are asking the question, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How are we going to keep our coach when the cards are stacked against us in both non-conference and in-conference? And for BYU, you won't have to ask that. Like, Baylor's going to have a really tough go at things when they play Auburn, SMU, Samford, Arizona State, at Oklahoma State, Kansas State. That's the 4 of those games are really brutal. So you get a bye week and then go on the road against TCU, who will still be very good this season. That sucks. If you're BYU, I'd be very happy with the Big 12 has you, even though that 70-day gap with 2 home games seems so daunting.
Boy, that Baylor schedule.
That's not fun, man. SMU, Auburn, Arizona State to open Big 12 play, Kansas State.
Here's the upside, though. That's what, a 5-game stretch that you listed?
Yeah, something like that.
If Baylor goes 3-2 in that 5-game stretch, are we extending Dave Aranda for a lifetime contract?
Probably, actually, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it feels like it's worthy of. So I look at this BYU schedule, and yeah, the home game aspect is challenging and suboptimal, but I look at the road games, Drake, and they're going to be settled into the season before they play a road game that I think is truly difficult at Iowa State on October 25th. I know at Colorado and at Arizona are capable of being difficult, but I don't know, even with Fafita back, that Arizona is going to be some great team. And I think Colorado is a pullback team. So the hot start for BYU they had this past season, I think that's 100% attainable with the returning core of players that they have beyond Jake Retzlaff at quarterback.
Sure, yes. I would look for the BYU Cougars to be a top 15, borderline top 10 team after their first 3 weeks of the season, based on the way their schedule is and where they will likely be in the 16-17 range in the preseason AP poll. From there, we'll start to ask the question, would it have been worth it to play a road game against NC State? Would it have been worth it to play a road game against Wake Forest to try to get an experience against another Power 4 school and face some sort of pushback or some sort of competition? I don't think they're going to get that out of Stanford or depleted ECU. And like you mentioned, we still have enough question marks that Colorado
Stanford,
could be
I don't know. I legitimately don't know. They have to be
in
better.
Lavelle, and it's going to be a night game too.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I think Troy Taylor's a really good coach. He's had a couple of wins in his tenure that he shouldn't have had based on the talent profile that Stanford has. So I don't know that you learn nothing there, but Stanford's struggling to adapt to the modern world of college football. I just think they have a good coach, and if they're able to keep Elijah Brown healthy at quarterback, that was a blue chip guy coming out of modern day high school. He'd be young. It'd be a tough environment for him to win it. I wonder. That's all I say. I wonder. I don't think BYU's going to have the second most talented roster in that game, but on a given day, they could have the second best coaching staff. So I'm curious at that game at the very least. I'm also curious as to your thoughts on what Josh Pate suggested with regards to how the conferences should actually be aligned. And, well, I mean, it's not all a bad idea, at least not in Drake's view. All right, so Josh Pate threw something out the other day that is worthy of discussion on this very program.
Season.
Yes, off season. So he laid out his ideal college football conferences and what they would look like. And you know what? As crazy as it seems to suggest something like this, it's not the most far-fetched thing in the world if college football continues to move towards breaking away from other sports and being its own entity. Something like this, maybe we wouldn't call it conferences, maybe we would call it divisions, I don't know, could in fact return to the sport one day, but the Pac-10, not 12, Pac-10 would exist. Colorado and Utah would be a part of the Big 8 with Missouri, Oklahoma State, Nebraska, Iowa State, and the Kansas schools. The ACC would have a lot of familiar faces, but the Big East would return. The Big 10 wouldn't look as it does right now. Drake, you have thoughts on this. What exactly do you think Mr. Pate is getting wrong with this idea?
I'm fairly passionate about the idea that we would send BYU into independence. Very interesting to me that they if you're a BYU fan and you've been so happy, they're at a conference for 2 years, and then someone who represents a large portion of college football podcasters or creators, or a guy who I consider to be a very middle of the road voice. And what I'm trying to say there is that he's very like people listen to him, he's talented, and he plays it down the middle. That's a guy that I trust and I want to listen to. And then you're a BYU fan going, oh, we were just there for a long time. Please don't do it again. What I don't understand is his leaning on independent teams like Vanderbilt or Northwestern, Notre Dame being independent, still in Josh Pate's fantasy world is also interesting to me. And where I do think this is complete and utter bad is a Mississippi State getting to stay in the SEC, or a school like a Northwestern still being in this conversation, because not Northwestern, but Wake Forest still being in this conversation. Because what we know is in the future of college football, what we're going to see is if you don't have enough money to revenue share with your athletes, if you don't have enough money to be a valuable member of your conference and bring the conference money, you're going to at some point die. And if you have enough money to move up, you're going to move up. What we're seeing is a Florida State, a Clemson, and North Carolina being unhappy to the point where we're going to try to rework how we pay our schools in the ACC just to keep them in that conference. And the day can come where they're able to go to the Big Ten, the SEC, and not make $20 million less than other schools like an Illinois for playing in the Big Ten. And the Big Ten goes, well, we would love to have Florida State. What are we doing with Illinois over here, though? Do we have to have those guys? Those conversations are going on behind closed doors right now of how to be profitable in college football today. And I don't think the way to do that is to create a Southwest Conference with TCU and Rice and Arkansas and Baylor and Texas Tech and the University of Texas Longhorns. This is a fun Josh Pate pipe dream. What I don't understand is if we're going to create the perfect pipe dream, why it would look exactly like this. I think there are too many holes, and it almost seems as though we're adding hope to something that is hopeless. We'll go with Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football, in the front row.
Yes, thank you. So one thing that he is attempting to highlight here that I can appreciate is the importance of regionality and a return to that, because these new look conferences, there are exciting elements about them. You get some great games, Oregon, Ohio State this past year, Michigan, Washington in the Big Ten, Texas and Georgia in the SEC. There are plenty of great games. There are some upsides to it all. But the regionality in college football has always mattered more than it has in the NFL. That has been the case my entire life. Rivalries and regionality, I think, have been the two separating factors that make college football better in the NFL. To me,
small pin, you could argue that the NFL is now more regionally apt than college football. Divisions, man, they're closer than Rutgers and UCLA.
No, that's true. That's true with the divisions they have, but division games, even though you play an opponent twice a year, which I think actually minimizes the importance in some sense of rivalry games like Seahawks 49ers, you don't have the same level of urgency to any one of those particular games because the NFL is, hey, you can lose 6 games, still make the playoff. And that's where college football is migrating towards. We're already at the point where you can lose 2 games. That didn't used to be the case and make the playoff, except for 2007 LSU, who won a national championship.
Clemson?
Clemson just got in with 3 via the automatic qualifier. Of course, speaking of the Seahawks and automatic qualifiers, 7-9 pride, baby. Upset the Saints with the Beastquake back in 2009, I believe.
Hasselbeck, I think. Yeah.
Matt Hasselbeck, indeed. So I look at what college football can be and say, look, the idea of breaking off sounds really, really scary, and all these changes could take place. And I understand why there are schools like Florida State and Clemson, the ACC, looking around going, wait a minute, why are we paying for this school over here when we're the ones that bring in the money? But that question doesn't get asked in the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys, for all of the overrated nonsense that is that entire brand that hasn't been to a conference championship game literally in my conscious lifetime or yours, that brand is so incredibly valuable and their viewership is so high. You tell me it's the same as the Jags? Guess what? It's not. But there is a salary cap and everyone gets the same amount of money from the media rights contract. And the amount of payroll you have relative to your fan base is on you, what you can draw. How many people do you get in? What prices do you charge? All those sorts of things, right? But from a media rights standpoint, it's equal. And we understand that is okay. Because going back to the fans, Drake, that creates the best product on the field. The parity in the NFL has always been one of its greatest strengths. College football is starting to migrate there with the transfer portal and NIL to level the roster playing field. But then people want to exacerbate the differences again in ways that other leagues just don't. You've got the Dodgers spending however much money, I don't even know, in Major League Baseball. I'm sorry, that's not good for the sport. It's not good for fans. So I get why people have that very kind of American capitalistic instinct of you get paid what you're worth and all this sort of stuff. And I understand where your head is at. But if you're talking overall health of the sport, you do want a lot of different places and fan bases to feel we have a legitimate opportunity here.
Sure. I just don't believe that we'll get to a point. I'm not sure we've been there in decades where every conference out of the 10 will be considered equal. And even in this that Pate pitches, the SEC still has Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Florida major brands. And then the Big East that we're reviving is Rutgers and BC and Cincinnati and UConn and UCF. There's like always going to be that hodgepodge bunch that gets pushed down the totem pole and they sit there forever. The AAC has, we can do it. Come on, we're getting real close to that Power 5. And then today they were gutted by the Big 12 and they've struggled to stay afloat as a power in college football. And we are hearing Memphis, the Pac-12 could be a thing moving forward. So you'll always have, like you said, that kind of capitalistic mindset of like, okay, we'll just have more money. And to me, I then pose the question based on what you just said, do we reprimand Ohio State for buying a championship? We talked in the regular season, the preseason for, hey, they're spending so much on NIL. They're bringing in so many transfer players with their NIL. The Dodgers, that to me replicates a lot of what the Dodgers did. Let's just spend a lot of money. We've got it. We'll go grab the best player.
Ohio State has a far higher percentage of its roster that was homegrown recruited high school talent who are certainly making NIL dollars, to be sure, than what the Dodgers have done in the last couple of years. Like, Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, those weren't Dodgers farm system guys. They just went out and paid them. Like, they've got the money to do it, and so they did. I respect their commitment to wanting to win, but and they're not doing anything illegal. They're operating within the framework of the league. But then you have to go to the organizational structure of of the MLB and say, okay, this is not where you want to be going. And as more money gets pushed into college football, you don't want to have fan bases all over the country of programs that should be able to compete at a high level feeling hopeless. That's not good for the sport.
Sure, but I pose the question, if that fan base is Wake Forest, if that fan base is Oregon State, at what point have we shaved off those universities, those schools, because they can't keep up financially? And then how do we carry that weight? How does a school like an Ohio State one day or a Clemson supposed to pick up Wake Forest and say, okay, we'll give you a couple dollars? I don't think that will ever be a thing in college football again.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not gonna donate to Wake Forest. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, that's because you have literally no affiliation to Wake Forest, so I'm not overly surprised.
Neither does Clemson. Clemson shouldn't care about Wake Forest. Like, if Wake Forest dies off,
right. But in the NFL, do the Cowboys care about the Jags?
No, but we have a pretty even playing field there because, as you mentioned, the salary caps and the TV rights deals.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost like if you applied those same sort of principles, you could.
Hey, but I'd still rather play basketball in Boca Raton than Champaign. There are advantages outside of money.
That's a you decision. I just want to make it clear, everyone. Drake is disrespecting Champaign, Illinois. I would never do such a horrible thing, and we're ending the show right there. Drake has been muted. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.